Good morning, everyone. I'm standing in what used to be my garden. But let me take you back to 6 months ago, when this patch of earth was my pride and joy. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd step barefoot onto my back porch with coffee steam curling in the cool air. My garden wasn't just plants, it was my sanctuary. Rows of vibrant marigolds, heirloom tomatoes heavy on their vines, butterflies dancing between lavender stalks. My grandmother taught me that gardens are where families grow their stories. Every seed I planted carried 3 generations of love. This garden began 43 years ago when my grandparents moved to Willowbrook Estates. Back then, every yard bloomed with personality. But that Tuesday morning, everything changed. Sharp, aggressive knocking at my front door, heavy footsteps crunching across gravel. A stern woman in a blazer slapped an official notice against my fence post. Your garden violates Section 5.2b of Community Landscaping Standards. Remove all unauthorized plantings immediately or face escalating daily fines of $75, $150, $300. My hands trembled as I read those words. My neighbor heard the shouting from 3 houses down. She said it was like watching someone get their heart ripped out. I stared at that wilted notice paper, my coffee mug forgotten on the porch rail, trying to understand how flowers could be a crime. But when I tried to explain my way out of it, I discovered Karen had already plotted the next move. Let me tell you what this garden meant to our community. People would drive out of their way just to see it. Kids pressed their noses against my fence, asking about the giant sunflowers. Last month, Mrs. Chen from the end of the street brought her visiting grandchildren to see my butterfly sanctuary. My neighbor told me, it's like having the neighborhood's heartbeat right there on Maple Street. When her roses bloom in June, I time my evening walks just to breathe them in. This wasn't just about plants. This was about community, tradition, and the right to nurture beauty in your own backyard. Children learned patience through planting seasons. Neighbors shared vegetables over backyard fences. My garden was where harvest festivals brought the whole street together. Then the first fine arrived Friday afternoon. $75 for excessive lawn deviation, creating aesthetic inconsistency. I read that HOA handbook 3 times. Nowhere does it mention anything about prohibiting flowers or vegetables. Section 5.2b talks about maintaining common area landscaping standards. But my garden was on my private property. I spent hours flipping through dense pages of regulations, highlighter squeaking across legal jargon, searching for any justification for their demands. There was none. Neighbors stopped to chat over my fence every evening. Children pointed excitedly at monarch butterflies. Elderly couples held hands while admiring the roses. This garden was the soul of our street. And then Karen sent a team of landscapers to raise my raised beds at sunrise, leaving nothing but bare dirt. Karen Wellington had been HOA president for 6 years. 6 years of measuring lawn heights, issuing color-approved paint swatches, and turning neighborly disputes into legal battles. At every board meeting, she'd stand at the podium with her thick binder labeled Community Standards Enforcement, fingers drumming, against the cover. Floral displays create visual chaos that undermines our carefully curated neighborhood aesthetic, she'd announce in her clipped, authoritative voice. Gardens invite unpredictable growth patterns that lower collective property values. One neighbor told me she once fined my neighbor for hanging a bird feeder because it attracted excessive wildlife activity. It's like she lives to watch joy die. Karen's own front yard was sterile squares of identical shrubs, perfectly edged grass, not a wildflower in sight. But her crusade against gardens wasn't about aesthetics, it was about money. See, Karen owned Wellington Landscape Solutions, LLC, a business specializing in low-maintenance residential solutions. Translation, ripping out gardens and installing artificial turf. Every garden she eliminated meant potential contracts for her company. I watched her stamp violation confirmed across another homeowner's appeal with a satisfied smile that made my skin crawl, but nobody suspected that behind her smile, Karen was orchestrating a multi-million-dollar scheme. They came at sunrise on a Thursday. No warning, no final notice. 5:30 a.m., and the rumble of heavy machinery shattered the morning silence. Three men in hard hats emerged from a white pickup truck. Behind them, a small backhoe lurched off a trailer. HOA authorized removal of non-compliant landscaping. Stand back, ma'am, the contractor shouted as I appeared in my pajamas. Phone, already dialing. Wait, you can't just... This is my property, I frantically protested. The mechanical roar of the backhoe's engine drowned out my voice. I watched in horror as metal teeth bit into my raised cedar beds. Heirloom tomato plants flew through the air, roots trailing soil like tears. 50-year-old rose bushes crushed under mechanical treads. Compost bins overturned, spilling dark earth across concrete. 3 generations of gardening destroyed in 47 minutes. Grandmother's peonies, gone. The butterfly bush where my daughter took her first steps, shredded. I stood in the wreckage, filming on my phone, tears streaming down my face. My neighbor said she heard me crying from inside her house. It was like listening to someone mourn at a funeral. The fines escalated daily. $75 became $200. $200 became $500. By week 3, Karen was demanding $1,800 in continued non-compliance penalties. I was bleeding money for the crime of loving flowers. My emergency fund, gone. My daughter's college savings, touched. Bank statements scattered across my kitchen table showed my savings dwindling to nothing. People were terrified. Neighbors whispered behind curtains, had hushed phone conversations, cast fearful glances toward Karen's house. As one resident put it, if she could destroy Sarah's garden, what would she do to us? Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I returned home to find a bulldozer parked where my herb garden once flourished. My phone rang one evening. Sarah? This is Margaret Chen from the Master Gardener program. I heard what happened to your garden. Margaret served on the HOA landscaping committee for 3 years before Karen pushed her out. What she did to your garden? There's no bylaw that authorizes it, she told me. Margaret introduced me to Frank Torres, a 71-year-old retired land use attorney. In his cluttered office filled with law, books, Frank spread the HOA handbook across his desk. Section 5.2b specifically addresses common area maintenance and shared landscaping expenses, he said, pointing at the text. It says nothing about private gardens on individually owned lots. But Karen cited this exact section, I protested, because she's banking on homeowners not reading the fine print. Look here. Frank flipped to page 47. Amendment procedures require approval by 2/3 of homeowners. When did Karen add garden restrictions? We spent hours digging through filing cabinets, scanning meeting minutes, cross-referencing voting records. Margaret was excited when we discovered the truth. There's no record of any garden ban being voted on. Ever. Frank leaned back in his chair, which means Karen's been operating outside her authority for 6 years. We huddled around the evidence, highlighted documents, sticky notes, legal precedents. We had truth on our side, but Karen controlled the URI board, the meetings, and the community budget. As we shook hands in Frank's office, I knew we faced an uphill battle. We had the truth on our side, but without money or power, Karen still held all the cards. 12 neighbors sat in a circle on my back patio under string lights, voices hushed in the darkness. Karen destroyed my garden illegally, I addressed the group, but she's coming for all of us next. Mrs. Patterson's herb spiral, Tom's vegetable patch, even children's playground, equipment she deems aesthetically inconsistent. Nods of understanding rippled through the circle. Someone passed around a manila folder marked EVIDENCE. My wife's afraid to plant anything now, one neighbor said. Our backyard looks like a prison yard. I brought $300. It's not much, but another offered. Margaret spoke up. Every dollar counts. We're forming Green Roots Holdings, LLC, a legal entity that can purchase HOA shares and voting rights. Frank presented the documents. Here's how it works. The original HOA incorporation allows for share transfers between community members. If we can acquire 51% of voting shares, we control the board. How much are we talking? I asked. Current shareholders pay annual fees of $800 per property. There are 73 homes in Willowbrook Estates. To gain control, we need to purchase shares from 37 homeowners at market rate. Quick mental math flashed across faces. About $30,000, Margaret calculated. Another neighbor added urgently, Karen scheduled a special meeting in 6 weeks to vote on a new community landscaping contract. If that passes, private gardens will be permanently banned. The group exchanged worried glances. I stood up. Then we have 6 weeks to save our neighborhood. We worked in absolute secrecy over the following weeks. Midnight fundraising calls, neighbors slipping cash-filled envelopes under doors, clandestine meetings in garages and basements. Karen's network of loyalists was everywhere. We couldn't risk word getting back to her. Every day I reviewed bank statements showing the growing Green Roots Holdings account balance, counting down to our moment of truth. With the vote looming, every secret we kept and every dollar we raised would determine our fate. The special meeting drew the largest crowd in HOA history. 73 homeowners crammed into a room built for 50. Cars packed, tight in the community center parking lot. Neighbors streaming through glass doors, tension crackling in the September air. Karen stood confidently at the podium, projection screen displaying Willowbrook Estates Beautification Initiative. Today we vote on the future of our community, she announced. Imagine uniform green lawns stretching from Maple to Elm Street. No more chaotic flower beds disrupting our property values. Murmurs rippled through the audience. I watched nervous faces, sweating palms as Karen clicked to her next slide. Wellington Landscape Solutions has provided a comprehensive proposal. Removal of all private gardens, installation of maintenance-free turf, ongoing care contracts, all funded through special assessments. I sat in the back row, manila envelope clutched tightly in my hands. All in favor of Resolution 2024-7, authorizing the Community Beautification Contract, Karen began. Point of order, I called out, standing up. The room fell silent. Karen's confident smile faltered. Before we vote on spending community funds, I have information about the board's authority to make such decisions, I said, walking forward. Frank Torres emerged from the crowd, briefcase in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frank Torres, retired land use attorney. I'm here to inform you that the current board has been operating without proper authorization for 6 years. Gasps echoed through the room. Heads turned. Karen's face reddened. This is highly irregular, she sputtered. I pulled documents from my envelope. What's irregular is destroying private property without legal authority. What's irregular is using HOA funds to benefit your private landscaping business. The room erupted in shocked whispers. I held up a deed. As of this morning, Green Roots Holdings, LLC, owns 53% of HOA voting shares. I hereby call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board. Pandemonium broke out. Karen frantically shuffled papers. Board members looked panicked. Frank's voice boomed over the chaos. All in favor of removing Karen Wellington as HOA president. Hands shot up throughout the room. I watched determined faces as the count was taken. Motion carries unanimously. Karen Wellington is hereby removed from office. Karen's face crumbled. The crowd erupted in cheers. Karen's empire began to crumble, but she wasn't about to go down quietly. Karen launched into desperate last-ditch efforts. Phone, calls to lawyers, angry emails to board members, threats posted on community message boards. Her shrill voice message to former allies. This is an illegal coup. I'll sue every one of you for conspiracy and fraud. Meanwhile, neighbors celebrated in the community center parking lot, hugging, shaking hands, children running between the cars. One resident told me, it felt like Liberation Day. 6 years of fear and intimidation, gone in one afternoon. I walked through my destroyed garden, space now marked with small flags and measuring tape, planning the restoration. Victory tasted different than I expected, bitter and sweet at the same time. We'd won the war, but the battlefield was still scorched earth. Within hours, no gardens signs were torn down throughout the neighborhood. By evening, trips to the nursery had cleaned out their entire vegetable seedling inventory. Neighbors worked together installing new raised beds, sharing tools, children helping plant. One observer noted, community gardens were sprouting on every block. It was like watching the neighborhood remember how to breathe. But our celebration was interrupted by a knock at my door. A process server handed me official papers. You've been served. Karen Wellington is suing for damages and demanding immediate reinstatement. My face fell as I scanned the lawsuit, realizing our battle wasn't over. Yet as we celebrated our victory, a sneaky clause in the original HOA contract caught my eye. The new board met for the first time in the community center. I sat at the head table, gavel in hand. First order of business, revising our community landscaping bylaws to explicitly protect private gardens, limit board terms to 2 years, and require transparent voting on all expenditures. Unanimous approval and applause filled the room. Frank presented the revised bylaws. These new rules ensure no future board can abuse their authority the way Karen did. We held a ceremony in the community, common area, unveiling a small plaque. Heritage Grove dedicated to the Garden Defenders of 2024. We renamed the Central Green Space Heritage Grove and dedicated it to everyone who fought for their right to grow beauty. Families planted saplings along the main walkway. Kids laughed as dirt flew. Elders smiled, watching the next generation learn to nurture growth. But as I read through the fine print of our original HOA contract that evening, I discovered a troubling clause buried on page 37. Should residential garden coverage exceed 50% of total frontage, ownership rights revert to the original developer for community replanting. My blood ran cold. We'd won the battle for our gardens, but if too many neighbors started planting, we could lose our homes entirely. The original developer, Hartwell Properties, still held rights to reclaim the entire neighborhood under specific conditions. And our garden revival was pushing us dangerously close to that threshold. Just when we thought the nightmare was over, that hidden clause threatened to undo everything we'd fought for. Standing here now, 6 months later, I want to share what this experience taught me about power, property rights, and community solidarity. The flashlight beam cuts through 20 years of darkness, revealing dust particles dancing like forgotten souls in the abandoned saint. Michael's chapel basement. Luis Martinez adjusts his work gloves and steps deeper into the shadows, his boots echoing against cracked concrete floors that haven't felt human footsteps since 1988. The air itself feels thick with secrets, carrying whispers of incense and something else. Something that makes his skin crawl with recognition he can't quite place. Above him, empty choir pews stretch toward an altar draped in white sheets that billow, despite the absence of any breeze. But down here in the basement storage room, something else waits in the darkness. The beam catches a glint of metal, an old filing cabinet pushed against the far wall, its drawers slightly ajar as if someone left in a desperate hurry. Luis approaches slowly, noting how the dust patterns on the floor seem deliberately disturbed, forming strange circular impressions near the cabinet's base that look almost like footprints frozen in time. He pulls open the top drawer with trembling fingers. Empty, save for a single dead moth pressed against the back corner. The second drawer creaks open with a sound like a scream muffled by years of silence, revealing a single item that shouldn't exist. A tarnished brass key attached to a leather cord, warm to the touch despite the basement's bone-deep chill. The key pulses against his palm like a heartbeat, and when his fingers close around it, a sound drifts from somewhere above. The faint echo of voices harmonizing in perfect, impossible harmony. So soft, he almost convinces himself it's the wind through broken windows. If you love spine-tingling mysteries, like and subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Because what happens next will change everything you think you know about that night in 1988. Luis pockets the key, feeling its unnatural warmth against his chest, and moves toward a section of the basement he's never noticed before, despite cleaning here for 3 days. The shadows seem deeper there, older, as if they've been gathering strength for decades. The air tastes of old incense and something else, something metallic and sharp, like the aftermath of lightning striking sacred ground. His flashlight flickers once, twice, then steadies on a loose floorboard that doesn't match the others, its wood darker and seemingly untouched by time's decay. But what Luis finds hidden under that floorboard will haunt you forever. St. Michael's Catholic Church once stood as the beating heart of Millbrook Township, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven, while its basement held the community's deepest secrets. Built in 1923 from limestone quarried in nearby hills, the church had weathered the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless personal tragedies. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared the congregation for the night of October 15th, 1988. The St. Michael's Choir wasn't just any church group. These 37 voices had performed at Carnegie Hall, recorded 3 albums that still play on classical radio stations, and drawn visitors from 5 neighboring states to their monthly concerts that filled every pew and spilled into the aisles. Martha Hendricks, the choir director, had trained at Juilliard under masters who had themselves learned from European maestros. Young Timothy Walsh could hit bass notes so low they seemed to emanate from the earth itself, while Sarah Martinez, Luis's older sister, possessed a soprano voice so pure it seemed to channel the divine, making hardened construction workers weep during Sunday services. That Tuesday evening started like any other rehearsal, routine perfected over 15 years. Parents dropped off teenagers at the familiar entrance. Adults carpooled from their office jobs and factory shifts. And Father McKinnon unlocked the chapel at exactly 7 p.m., as he had every Tuesday and Thursday since taking over the parish. By 7:15, all 37 members had signed in on Martha's leather-bound attendance sheet, their signatures forming a roll call that would become evidence in a case that remains unsolved. By 7:30, they were running scales, their voices blending in perfect harmony as they prepared for Sunday's special Reformation Day service that had sold out weeks in advance. At 9:47 p.m., Mrs. Eleanor Hoffman arrived to pick up her daughter Rebecca, expecting to find the usual post-rehearsal chaos of members gathering their sheet music and chatting about the upcoming performance. Instead, she found the chapel doors unlocked, every light blazing as if frozen in time, and not a single soul inside. 37 choir. Members had simply vanished. No signs of struggle, no broken windows, no disturbed hymnals. Their purses and car keys remained neatly arranged on the back pew where they'd been placed according to Martha's strict protocol. Their sheet music lay open to page 43 of Sanctus in D minor, pencil marks still visible where Martha had noted tempo changes. Even their coffee was still warm in the fellowship hall, steam rising from abandoned cups like incense from an unholy altar. The police. Investigation consumed 6 months, interviewed over 300 witnesses, and generated a case file 4 inches thick that gathered dust in the sheriff's office basement. Search teams with bloodhounds combed 3 counties, dragging ponds and searching abandoned buildings. Psychics traveled from California claiming visions of underground chambers. The FBI opened a file that remains classified to this day, their agents asking questions about Cold War experiments and government research that no one understood. Theories ranged from mass abduction to cult activity to government conspiracy. But every lead turned to ash, every witness recanted, every psychic vision led to empty fields and false hope. The families never recovered from the devastation. Luis's parents divorced within 2 years, his mother unable to look at his father without seeing Sarah's absence reflected in his eyes. The church membership dwindled from 800 faithful souls to barely 50 diehards who refused to abandon their spiritual home. Father McKinnon suffered a complete nervous breakdown and transferred to a monastery in Vermont where he maintains a vow of silence to this day. By 1995, St. Michael's had closed its doors permanently, leaving behind only memories and questions that tortured an entire community for 2 decades. Until today, every clue turned to ash. Luis Martinez never wanted to set foot in sight. Michael's again, but desperation makes us do things our hearts resist with every fiber of their being. At 34, he's worked every cleaning job in Millbrook Township. The high school after budget cuts eliminated the full-time custodial staff, the old movie theater before it became another soulless dollar store, the shuttered factory where his father once worked before arthritis bent his hands into permanent claws, and now this, preparing the abandoned church for demolition so developers can build another strip mall to slowly strangle what remains of downtown's fading heart. He pauses at the basement entrance, work-worn hands gripping the wooden railing that Sarah's fingers once touched. remembering her laugh echoing through these halls when he was 12 and she was 17, golden-voiced and full of dreams that stretched beyond Millbrook's borders. She used to sneak him into choir practice, letting him sit in the back pew with a comic book while she rehearsed, her voice soaring toward the vaulted ceiling like a prayer made audible. Music is prayer made. Audible, she'd whisper during the break, ruffling his hair with hands that smelled of rosin and the vanilla perfume she wore to every rehearsal. And even at 12, Louise understood she wasn't just talking about the notes on the page. She was talking about touching something divine, something that made the ordinary world shimmer with possibility. The divorce papers in his truck's glove compartment remind him why he took this job, despite every instinct screaming at him to drive away. Maria wants half of everything, including the house his grandmother left him along with her rosary beads and the cast iron skillet that still makes the best cornbread in 3 counties. Lawyers don't work for free, and Luis needs every dollar this church cleanup will pay, even if it means confronting ghosts he spent 20 years avoiding. Ghosts that whisper Sarah's name in his dreams and leave him waking with tears on his pillow. Luis descends the basement stairs slowly, each creaking step awakening. Memories he'd buried so deep he convinced himself they were gone forever. This is where the youth group held pizza parties that lasted until Father McKinnon had to chase them out with threats of calling parents. This is where Sarah practiced piano for her solo auditions, her fingers dancing across keys that knew her touch better than any lover ever would. This is where families gathered after services, their laughter mixing with the scent of coffee and the homemade snickerdoodles his mother contributed every Sunday until the day she stopped baking, stopped laughing, stopped being anything but a shadow of the woman who once filled this basement with joy. He wipes sweat from his forehead, despite the basement's bone-deep chill, and pulls work gloves over hands that remember helping Sarah arrange sheet music on these very stands. Hands that remember the weight of her hug the last time he saw her alive. Hands that have never stopped reaching for a sister who vanished into silence. The Janitor dust here isn't just debris. It's the residue of shattered dreams, broken families, and a community's lost innocence. Every box he moves, every cobweb he clears, feels like disturbing a grave that should remain undisturbed. But Luis Martinez learned long ago that some graves need disturbing, some secrets demand to be unearthed, and sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to refuse to let their stories die with them. The loose floorboard doesn't belong in this basement's carefully constructed foundation. Luis has been cleaning basements for 15 years, crawling through the forgotten spaces beneath businesses and homes, and he knows the difference between settling foundation and deliberate concealment. This particular board, darker than the others and slightly raised at one corner, like a silent invitation, practically begs for investigation. When he kneels and runs his calloused fingers along its edges, he feels the deliberate cuts where someone used a saw to create a hidden compartment, the wood still smooth despite decades of neglect. His crowbar slides easily into the gap with a whisper of metal against wood, and with a soft crack that echoes through the basement's cathedral-like silence, the board lifts away. Beneath lies a rectangular cavity lined with oiled leather that gleams despite the darkness. Someone took extraordinary care to protect whatever hides here from moisture, time, and prying eyes. Luis's flashlight beam reveals a leather-bound ledger, its cover embossed with St. Michael's Choir, private rehearsal notes, in fading gold letters that seem to shimmer in the artificial light. The book feels heavier than it should, as if weighted with more than paper and ink, as if the very words inside carry their own gravitational pull. Its leather binding shows where patterns suggesting frequent, almost obsessive handling, and the brass clasp still holds strong despite decades of neglect, polished to a dull shine by countless fingers. When Luis lifts it from its hiding place with trembling hands, he notices something else that makes his stomach clench. The wood beneath the cavity isn't rotted or stained like the surrounding floorboards. Someone oiled and maintained this secret compartment regularly, lovingly, possibly right up until October 15th, 1988. He opens the ledger carefully, treating it like a sleeping snake that might strike, and the scent that emerges makes his throat constrict with recognition and terror. Not the musty odor of old paper that should fill his nostrils, but something else entirely. Incense, yes, but underneath that familiar church smell lurks something metallic and sharp, like the smell that hangs in the air after lightning strikes sacred ground, like the taste of copper pennies held too long on the tongue. The first page contains an inscription in Martha Hendricks's precise, educated handwriting, for rehearsals that cannot be witnessed by ordinary souls, for voices that must remain hidden from consecrated ground, for the music that calls to what lies beneath the foundation of faith. The subsequent pages reveal sheet music Lewis has never seen before, despite years of watching Sarah practice. Compositions with titles that make his skin crawl. Invocation in G minor, Threshold Hymn, The Summoning Sanctus, and Songs for the Deep Listeners. The musical notation looks standard at first glance, following the rules Sarah taught him during their childhood piano lessons. But margin. Notes in multiple handwriting suggest these weren't ordinary choir pieces meant for Sunday worship. Comments like, "Sarah hits the high C perfectly here. The response from below is immediate and hungry, and Timothy's bass line opens the door wider each time. Be ready for what answers." Dot the pages in increasingly frantic handwriting. But it's the final entry that stops Luis's breath entirely, making him feel like he's drowning in basement air. Dated October 15, 1988, in Martha's increasingly erratic handwriting that slopes across the page like a fever dream. Tonight we perform the complete sequence as it was meant to be heard. Father McKinnon doesn't know what we've discovered in the crypt. The others are ready. They've been practicing the hidden harmonies. Sarah says she can hear them calling from below, singing the songs that predate Christianity itself. God forgive us, but we must answer. The music demands completion. Below that, in different ink and shakier handwriting that looks like it was written during an earthquake. Something went wrong. The door opened too wide. They're not coming back. Hide this book where no one will find it. Let no one else attempt what we attempted. Some songs should never be sung by human voices. He flips the ledger open to a page marked with a black ribbon that feels warm to the touch, and what the first entry reveals will freeze his blood. The black ribbon marks a page unlike all the others. Its parchment darker, older, as if torn, from a different book entirely, a book that predates St. Michael's by centuries. The musical notation here follows no rules Luis recognizes from his sister's patient piano lessons or any hymnal he's ever seen. Notes climb and descend the staff in patterns that hurt to follow with his eyes, creating visual rhythms that seem to pulse and breathe even in the stillness, like a heartbeat captured in ink. The title, written in Latin he doesn't understand, but somehow fills him with dread, translates roughly to Song of the Deep Threshold, according to a penciled note in Martha's handwriting. But it's not the alien musical notation that makes Luis's hands tremble like autumn leaves. It's the margin notes, written in at least 7 different hands, documenting what happened when they dared to practice this particular piece during those final, terrifying weeks. October 1st. During rehearsal, Mrs. Patterson fainted when we reached measure 37. She claimed she heard her deceased husband calling her name from somewhere beneath the floor. October 3rd. The basement temperature dropped 15 degrees during the bridge section. Timothy's breath became visible in clouds despite the heating system running full blast. Something answered when he hit the low F. October 8th. Sarah achieved something beyond perfect pitch in the final movement. The church windows began vibrating. Father McKinnon investigated from the chapel above but found nothing unusual, though he commented that the air tasted of copper and ozone. October 12th, final dress rehearsal. 3 members of the congregation reported hearing choir voices emanating from the basement at 2 a.m., though the church was locked and empty. Police found no signs of break-in. The final margin note in Martha's increasingly desperate handwriting, dated October 15th at 7 p.m. Tonight we perform it as it was written, complete with the hidden verse we found carved into the crypt wall. Sarah believes she finally understands what we've been calling all these weeks. The door's almost open. God help us all. We can't stop now. Luis realizes his flashlight has been dimming steadily, though he replaced the batteries this morning with fresh ones from the hardware store. The basement seems quieter now, as if the building itself holds its breath in anticipation. From somewhere above, or perhaps below, from depths he doesn't want to contemplate, comes the faintest sound of voices humming in perfect, impossible harmony, too distant to be real, too clear to be his imagination playing tricks. We'll reveal that chilling verse momentarily. Lewis can't face this discovery alone. Not when every page of the ledger screams with secrets that destroyed his sister and 36 others. His hands shake as he climbs the basement stairs, the ancient book clutched against his chest like a talisman that burns even through his work shirt. The brass key in his pocket grows warmer with each step, as if responding to proximity to something it was meant to unlock. Father O'Connell lives in the rectory beside the old parish, the last surviving priest who remembers that terrible October night. At 73, his hands tremble from more than age when Louise shows him the ledger, and his face drains of color as he recognizes Martha's handwriting. "I told them to leave the basement alone," he whispers, his Irish accent thickening with emotion. "Some stones shouldn't be turned. Some doors shouldn't be opened." As Father O'Connell examines the ledger with reverent terror, his weathered fingers trace the margin notes while his lips move in silent prayer. "The choir members started changing in those final weeks," he confesses, his voice barely audible. "They claimed to hear voices beneath the choir loft during regular Sunday services, voices that sang in harmonies no human throat could produce. Sarah came to me 3 days before they vanished. She said the music was calling to her, in her dreams, teaching her melodies that existed before words, before light itself." The priest's hands pause on a page filled with musical notation that seems to writhe in the lamplight. "Martha found something in the church crypt, a chamber we'd sealed decades ago after the original priest reported disturbances. She convinced me it was just old foundations settling, but I knew better. I should have stopped them, should have burned this book the moment she showed it to me." "Father?" O'Connell's voice drops to a whisper as he points to a hidden margin note written in faded red ink. "The 7th Psalm opens the first door. The invocation in G minor opens the second. But the song of the deep threshold, that opens the door that should never be opened. The door to the place where the first music was born, where voices sing in the dark between worlds." He looks up at Louise with eyes that have seen too much, survived too much. "Your sister had the purest voice I'd ever heard, pure enough to reach frequencies that touch other realms. Martha believed that certain combinations of voices, certain harmonies, could create bridges between our world and places that exist in the spaces between notes, between breaths, between heartbeats. As if summoned by their conversation, a sound echoes through the rectory, faint at first, then growing stronger. Voices harmonizing in perfect, impossible pitch, singing words in a language that predates human speech. Father O'Connell's hands clench the ledger as his face goes ashen. "They're still down there," he breathes. "After 20 years, they're still singing, still trying to complete whatever they started that night." The priest stands on shaking legs and retrieves a brass key from his desk drawer, identical to the one burning in Louise's pocket. "This opens the crypt beneath the altar. Martha gave me one key, kept one for herself. I thought sealing the entrance would end it, but some songs echo forever once they're begun." Through the rectory windows, the abandoned church looms against the darkening sky, its broken stained glass windows flickering with impossible light that pulses in rhythm with the distant singing. Father O'Connell crosses himself with trembling fingers. "If we're going to end this, if we're going to free their souls, we have to go down there. We have to face what they found beneath God's house." He mutters under his breath, words that chill Louise to the bone. "They opened something they shouldn't have, and it's been waiting 20 years for someone to finish the song." The brass keys fit perfectly into hidden locks built into the altar's foundation, mechanisms so old they seem to predate the church itself. As the stone door grinds open with a sound like dying angels, a rush of air escapes that tastes of centuries-old incense, and something far older, something that makes Louise's teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. Father O'Connell's flashlight beam reveals stairs carved from living rock, descending into darkness that seems to swallow light itself. "The original church was built over a natural acoustic chamber," he explains, his voice echoing strangely in the narrow passage. The founding priests thought they could sanctify whatever dwelt here with prayer and holy water. They were wrong. As they descend, the singing grows louder. Not the 37 voices Lewis expected, but hundreds, thousands, as if every soul who ever sought the why, divine through music had been trapped in this underground cathedral. The walls themselves pulse with harmonies that predate human language, rhythms that match no earthly heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs lies a revelation that stops both men in their tracks. The hidden chamber isn't just a basement, it's a vast underground amphitheater carved from limestone, its domed ceiling disappearing into shadows that seem to move with malevolent purpose. Ancient symbols cover the walls, not Christian, crosses, but something far older, symbols that hurt to look at directly. In the center of the chamber stands a sight that freezes Luis's blood. 37 choir robes hanging from invisible supports, swaying gently in air that doesn't move. Each robe bears the name of a missing choir member embroidered in silver thread. Sarah's robe hangs closest to the center, her name glowing with ethereal light. But it's what lies beneath the robes that reveals the truth. Scattered across the stone floor are hundreds of sheets of music, some yellowed with age, others looking fresh as if written yesterday. All bear the same impossible notation: music that climbs beyond human range, harmonies that exist in frequencies the human ear was never meant to process. Father O'Connell picks up a sheet with trembling hands. "This isn't choir music," he whispers in horror. "This is summoning notation. Every song, every hymn, they're all invocations designed to call something from the spaces between sounds, between silences." Martha didn't discover this music. She was taught it, note by note, by whatever dwells in the deepest frequencies of existence. As if responding to his words, the singing intensifies, and the choir robes begin to sway more violently. Through the fabric, shapes begin to form, translucent figures that mouth words in harmonies that make reality itself tremble. Louise sees Sarah's face appear in her robe, her mouth moving in silent song, her eyes pleading for release from whatever holds her between this world and the next. The ledger in Lewis's hands grows burning hot as every page flips open simultaneously, revealing the final secret that will change everything they thought they knew about that October night. What that ritual unleashed is beyond belief. Stay with us. The final pages of the ledger reveal themselves in a cascade of forbidden knowledge that makes Luis's mind reel with impossible truths. Written in multiple hands, Martha's, Sarah's, Timothy's, and others, the entries document not a single night of horror, but weeks of gradual possession by something that speaks through music itself. October 1st, the music teaches us new harmonies in our sleep. We wake with songs on our lips that we've never heard but somehow know by heart. October 5th, Martha says the chamber calls to us. The old music wants to be sung again, wants to bridge the gap between what was and what could be. October 10th, we understand now. We are not learning the songs. The songs are learning us, reshaping our voices, our souls, preparing us for the final performance. October 15th, tonight we become the instruments. Tonight the deep music plays through us forever. Father O'Connell reads over Luis's shoulder, his voice breaking as understanding dawns. They didn't disappear. They became part of something larger, something that uses human voices as instruments in a symphony that began before creation itself. The choir didn't vanish. They transformed into living music. As if responding to their revelation, the chamber erupts in cacophonous harmony. The translucent figures in the choir robes become more solid, their faces desperate as they mouth words neither man can hear, but both understand. Help us. Stop the song. Break the cycle. The brass key in Luis's pocket begins to vibrate with increasing intensity, and suddenly he understands its purpose. Not to open doors, but to close them. Not to begin the music, but to end it. His grandmother's voice echoes in his memory. "Every song has a beginning, mijo, but only the brave choose how it ends." Luis approaches Sarah's robe with trembling steps, feeling the weight of 20 years of grief and guilt pressing down on him like the cathedral ceiling itself. Her translucent face appears in the fabric, tears of starlight streaming down ethereal cheeks as she mouths the words she never got to say. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop singing. The music, it's so beautiful, Luis. So beautiful it burns. Father O'Connell pulls out a worn Bible, its pages yellow with age and desperate use. There's a counter harmony, he shouts over the growing cacophony. Every song of summoning has a song of sending. Every opening requires a closing. But someone has to sing it. Someone with a voice pure enough to match what's been calling from below. The priest's eyes meet Luis's with terrible understanding. You have her voice, don't you? The same gift, the same purity. I can hear it in how you speak, see it in how you move. You're the key, Luis. You're the instrument that can play the closing song. Around them, the chamber shudders as reality itself begins to thin. The walls become translucent, revealing glimpses of spaces that exist between musical notes, dimensions where sound takes physical form, and melodies live as sentient beings hungry for human voices to feed their eternal songs. Luis feels the truth settling into his bones like ice. To save his sister, to free the choir, to silence the deep music forever, he must risk becoming what they became. He must sing the counter harmony that will either close the door between worlds or open it so wide that the boundaries between music and madness disappear entirely. The brass key grows so hot it burns through his pocket, and Luis realizes with crystal clarity that some doors, once opened, can only be closed from the inside. As Luis raises his voice to begin the counter harmony, a revelation stops him cold. A final page hidden in the ledger's binding, revealed only when the ancient book falls open completely. Written in Sarah's handwriting but using ink that glows with otherworldly light, the message rewrites everything he thought he understood about that October night. Luis, if you're reading this, then the deep music has waited long enough for its final instrument. What happened to us wasn't an accident or a summoning gone wrong. We discovered the truth. This chamber is where music itself was born, where the first song split silence into sound and created the universe from pure harmony. We became guardians, not victims. Father O'Connell reads over Luis's shoulder, his breath catching as the implications become clear. The choir didn't disappear, he whispers. They chose to stay. They became willing guardians to prevent something far worse, the deep music spreading beyond this chamber into the world above. The translucent figures in the choir robes nod in unison, their faces no longer desperate but determined. Sarah's spirit moves closer, her voice finally audible as a whisper that bypasses his ears and speaks directly to his soul. The music showed us visions, Luis, cities where every human voice joins the eternal song, where free will dissolves into perfect harmony. We saw a world where the deep music overwrites human consciousness itself, turning everyone into instruments of cosmic melody. Around them, the chamber's true purpose becomes visible. The ancient symbols on the walls aren't summoning circles, they're containment seals, prison bars made of crystallized silence, holding back forces that could rewrite reality through pure sound. The choir didn't unleash the deep music. They became its willing jailers, using their voices to maintain the barriers between dimensions. But the seals are weakening, Sarah's spirit continues, her form flickering like a candle in wind. 20 years of containing something this powerful has worn us down. We need fresh voices, Luis, not to join the song, but to strengthen the silence that holds it back. Father O'Connell's hands shake as he points to inscriptions becoming visible on the chamber walls. Not ancient symbols, but modern names. Dozens of them, spanning decades. This isn't the first time, he breathes. Generation after generation, when the seals weaken, someone must choose. Someone with the gift must become a guardian. Luis feels the brass key cooling in his pocket and understands its true purpose. Not to open or close doors, but to choose, to step willingly into the space between music and silence, becoming a living barrier against forces that would remake reality in their own harmonic image. The deep music surges around them, testing the weakening barriers, and Luis hears its promise. Join us willingly, and we'll give you Sarah back. Resist, and watch as we consume every voice on earth, starting with the ones you love most. Through the chamber's translucent walls, Louise glimpses scenes of horror. Millbrook Township, where every human voice has joined a single overwhelming chorus, where individual thoughts have been harmonized out of existence, where his parents, his ex-wife, everyone he's ever known stands motionless, their mouths open in endless song. Sarah's spirit grabs his hand with fingers made of crystallized music. The choice was always yours, little brother. Will you sing with us to keep the world silent, or let silence die so the world can sing? Forever, huh? Then, the chamber fills with a light that burns like liquid music, and Luis realizes the deep music has been testing him all along. Luis closes his eyes and makes the choice that will define not just his fate, but the fate of every voice on earth. Instead of singing the counter harmony or joining the deep music's eternal song, he does something neither side expects. He begins to hum the lullaby Sarah used to sing to him during thunderstorms, a simple melody their grandmother taught. Her, passed down through generations of their family. The effect is immediate and profound. The complex harmonies filling the chamber falter, not because the lullaby overpowers them, but because it reminds every trapped voice of their humanity. One by one, the choir members' spirits begin humming along, their cosmic harmonies softening into something recognizably human, beautifully imperfect, gloriously individual. Sarah's spirit becomes more solid as she joins the lullaby, her voice blending with Luis's in the way it did when they were children. Around them, the deep music recoils not in defeat, but in something like respect, recognizing that the most powerful songs aren't cosmic symphonies or reality-bending harmonies, but the simple melodies that connect human hearts across time and space. You found the third choice, Sarah whispers, her spirit beginning to glow with warm, earthly light instead of the cold fire of cosmic harmony. Not to fight the music or join it, but to humanize it, to remind it what it's forgotten during eons of perfect, soulless song. The chamber begins to change around them. The ancient symbols on the walls shift and soften, becoming less like prison bars and more like sheet music, still containing the deep music, but now harmonizing with it instead of simply holding it back. The choir robes no longer hang empty, but fill with warm light as 37 souls prepare for their final performance. Father O'Connell weeps openly as he watches the miracle unfold. They're free, he breathes, not because the music released them, but because they chose to remember who they were before the song changed them. The brass key in Luis's pocket crumbles to dust, its purpose fulfilled not through opening or closing, but through the simple act of choosing love over fear, humanity over perfection. As the lullaby reaches its final notes, the choir members' spirits begin to fade, not into nothingness, but into peace, their 20-year vigil, finally complete. Sarah's spirit approaches Luis one last time, her face radiant with joy and relief. Thank you for remembering our song, she whispers, pressing a kiss to his forehead that feels like sunshine and forgiveness. Thank you for choosing to be human. As the last note of the lullaby echoes through the chamber, the translucent walls become solid stone once more. The deep music contained, but no longer imprisoned, transformed from a cosmic threat into something that remembers what it means to serve humanity rather than consume it. Lewis and Father O'Connell emerge from the crypt to find the church above them, bathed in dawn light. The broken windows somehow repaired and glowing with stained glass that depicts not saints or angels, but ordinary people singing together in joyful harmony. 3 months later, Louis stands in the renovated St. Michael's families fill the pews for the first service in over 20 years. The church developers withdrew their demolition plans after structural engineers reported that the building had somehow reinforced itself overnight, its foundation stronger than modern concrete. The basement has been converted into a memorial garden where 37 trees grow in impossible soil, their leaves rustling in harmonies that bring peace to every visitor. Father O'Connell, renewed in purpose, leads a congregation that includes several former members who felt called to return after experiencing dreams of beautiful, healing music. Luis works as the church's caretaker, no longer running from memories but tending them like the memorial garden below. His divorce papers remain unsigned in his truck's glove compartment. Some bridges, he's learned, are worth rebuilding. The ledger sits in a place of honor in the church's new library, its pages now filled with simple hymns and children's songs instead of cosmic invocations. Visitors often report feeling a presence when they read it, not threatening, but protective, as if guardian. Spirits watch over anyone who approaches music with pure intentions. On quiet evenings, when Lewis locks the church and walks to his truck, he sometimes hears faint harmonizing from the memorial garden. Not the overwhelming cosmic symphony that once threatened to consume reality, but something warmer, the sound of voices that remember what it means to be human, to be flawed, to be beautifully incomplete. The brass key may have crumbled, but Louise carries something more valuable now. The de world. Knowledge that the most powerful songs aren't the ones that change the world, but the ones that remind the world why it's worth saving. Every night before sleep, he hums Sarah's lullaby, and somewhere in the space between notes, he feels her presence, not trapped between worlds, but free to move between them as she chooses. The deep music still exists beneath the foundation, but it's no longer a threat. It's become what music was always meant to be, a bridge between souls, a reminder of what connects us all, a harmony that includes discord, because perfect songs, Louis has learned, are the ones that leave room for the human heart to improvise. What truly dwells beneath those melodies, and will we ever silence that final hymn? The answer, Louis knows now, isn't about silencing anything. It's about learning to sing together, imperfectly, beautifully, and with all the love our human voices can carry across the infinite spaces between one heartbeat and the next.